Welcome to Reddit Nightmares, where the internet's most disturbing true confessions come to life. Hit subscribe if you're brave enough for more real horror confessions that will follow you into your dreams.
A family's summer road trip leads them to an old mining town in Colorado that's been converted to a tourist attraction. When they miss the last tour bus out, they must spend the night in a historic hotel, where they discover the reenactors aren't actors at all and have been waiting for new residents. We thought it was just a quaint historical getaway. A few nights in an old hotel, stepping back in time. We were wrong. So terribly, horrifyingly wrong. The past wasn't just a theme here. It was alive, and it wanted us to stay. Forever. The idea had seemed charming enough at the time. A break from usual amusement parks and crowded beaches. A slice of authentic history, nestled in the Colorado mountains. Oakhaven, the brochure called it. A preserved 1880s mining town, complete with period building, costumed reenactors, and a chance to experience life as it was during the silver boom. Sarah had found it online, captivated by the sepia-toned photos of dusty saloons and stern-faced folks in bonnets and suspenders. Lily, our 10-year-old, was excited about dressing up like a prairie girl, while Tom, our 7-year-old, was just thrilled about the prospect of any place new that involved snacks in the car. I, Michael, was mostly looking forward to unplugging for a few days, away from the relentless hum of the city and my demanding job. The drive up was beautiful. The mountains rose around us, dusted with late spring snow and higher elevations, but the lower slopes were a riot of green and wildflowers. The air grew cooler, crisper, smelling of pine and damp earth. As we got closer, the road narrowed, winding through dense forest. The turnoff for Oakhaven was marked by a weathered wooden sign that looked genuinely old, half covered in moss. The paved road ended shortly after, giving way to packed dirt that kicked up a fine cloud behind our minivan. Oakhaven wasn't large. A single main street, lined with wooden buildings, a general store, a saloon, a blacksmith, a livery stable. At the far end, slightly grander, a hotel. There were a few other structures scattered around, smaller cabins and sheds. And beyond the town, the dark, imposing mouth of a mine shaft dug into the hillside. It felt quiet, quaint, yes, but also like time had truly stopped here, not just been preserved. We parked the car in a small dirt lot near the entrance, where a few other vehicles, mostly SUVs and trucks, were already parked. A man in overalls and a wide-brimmed hat, looking every bit the part of a 19th century miner, greeted us with a friendly wave and a hearty welcome to Oakhaven, folks. He gave us a map and pointed us toward the visitor center, housed in what looked like the old assay office. The visitor center was warm and smelled faintly of wood smoke. Even though it was summer, a woman in a long calico dress sat behind a counter, her smile wide and welcoming. She explained the town layout, the various demonstrations throughout the day, blacksmithing, gold panning, and the schedule for the tour bus that took visitors back to Main Road and the larger parking area by sundown. She spoke with a folksy, slightly theatrical drawl that fit the atmosphere perfectly. We paid our admission fee, grabbed some old-fashioned candy from a jar, and stepped back out into the bright mountain sun. The day was lovely. We watched the blacksmith pound glowing metal, tried our hand at panning for gold dust in a trough. Lily actually found a tiny speck, which she declared her most prized possession, and listened to a schoolmarm tell stories about pioneer life. The reenactors were everywhere, chatting with visitors, going about their daily tasks. They were good, really good. They stayed in character, using old-fashioned language, talking about the price of silver and the harsh mountain winters. It felt immersive, like stepping onto a movie set. We ate lunch at the saloon, which served surprisingly good stew and bread, and listened to a man playing a banjo in the corner. The atmosphere was light, full of laughter and the buzz of tourists enjoying a unique experience. As the afternoon wore on, we found ourselves drawn to the far end of town, towards a hotel. It was a 3-story wooden building, painted a faded blue with a wraparound porch. The sign above the door read, the Oakhaven Grand Hotel. It looked sturdy, well-maintained despite its age, but there was something about it, a stillness. Even from the outside, it felt quieter than the rest of the bustling town. Let's just peek inside, Sarah suggested. The lobby was dim, the heavy curtains drawn against the sun. It smelled of old wood, dust, and something else faintly sweet, like decaying flowers. The furniture was antique. Plush velvet chairs, a massive oak check-in desk, a faded oriental rug on the floor. There was a grandfather clock ticking loudly in the corner, its rhythmic beat amplified in the quiet space. Behind the desk sat a woman, her hair in a severe bun, wearing a dark, plain dress. She didn't smile as we entered. Her eyes, dark and depthless, simply watched us. "Afternoon," I said, trying to break the silence. She nodded slowly. "Afternoon," just looking around. Her voice was flat, devoid of the cheerful theatricality we'd heard from the other reenactors. "Yes, beautiful old place," Sarah said, stepping further into the room. The woman didn't reply, just continued to watch us. It was starting to feel less like a charming historical experience and more like we were intruding. Lily and Tom, usually boisterous, were clinging to our legs, suddenly quiet. Air in the lobby felt heavy, cold despite the summer day outside. "Well, thank you," I said quickly, feeling an irrational urge to leave, just admiring the architecture. "You'll find it quite accommodating," the woman said, her gaze fixed on mine. Her lips curved into a slight, unsettling smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day," I practically stammered, ushering Sarah and the kids back toward the door. Outside, the sun felt blindingly bright, the air fresh again. We exchanged a look. "Okay, that was a little creepy," Sarah murmured. "Yeah." She wasn't exactly welcoming. I agreed. Lily shivered despite the warmth. "She didn't look like the others," Tom said, his voice small. Her eyes were scary. We decided to head back towards the more lively parts of town, shaking off the strange encounter. But the feeling of that woman's gaze and that unsettling smile lingered. We spent the next hour exploring the old mine entrance, which was roped off but offered a cool breeze and a glimpse into dark, timber-lined tunnel. Then we did a little souvenir shopping at the general store, buying postcards and some more candy. Time seemed to slip away from us. We were having fun, caught up in the novelty of the place. We weren't keeping a close eye on the clock. It was Lily who noticed first. "Dad, aren't the buses stopping?" We looked toward the entrance of town. The area where the tour buses had been parked earlier was empty. The handful of remaining visitors seemed to be hurrying towards the exit. The sun was starting to dip below the mountaintops, casting long, eerie shadows. "Oh, shoot," I said, checking my watch. It was later than we thought. The visitor center woman had said the last bus left at sundown, and sundown was happening now. We rushed back to the visitor center. It was closed, dark. A sign on the door read, "Oakhaven is closed to visitors after sundown. Last bus departs promptly at 6 p.m. See you tomorrow." My stomach dropped. 6 p.m.? It's 6:15, I said, feeling a wave of panic. Sarah looked at me, her face pale. "We missed it." Okay, don't panic," I said, though my heart was hammering. There must be someone still here. The reenactors, the staff. Someone can give us a ride. But as we looked around, the cheerful daytime atmosphere was gone. The streets were empty. The saloon was dark. The blacksmith's forge was cold. The lively sounds of earlier in the day were replaced by a profound silence, broken only by the distant chirping of crickets and the mournful sigh of the wind through the trees. We walked the length of the main street, calling out, "Hello? Is anyone here? We missed the bus." Our voices echoed in the stillness. No answer. A prickle of unease, far sharper than the vague discomfort we felt at the hotel earlier, began to spread through me. We were truly alone, isolated. "Maybe someone's at the hotel," Sarah suggested, her voice trembling slightly. The hotel, the place where we'd met the woman with the empty eyes. The feeling of dread intensified, but it was the only possibility. We walked back toward the Oakhaven Grand Hotel. As we approached, the dim light spilling from the lobby windows seemed less inviting and more like the glow of predatory eyes. The grandfather clock inside was still ticking, sound unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. We pushed open the heavy door. The air inside was even colder than before, the smell of dust and decay more prominent. The woman was still there, behind the desk, exactly as we'd left her. She hadn't moved. She just watched us enter. We missed the last bus. I explained, trying to sound calm. Is there anyone who could possibly give us a ride out? We're stuck. Her unsettling smile returned, slow and deliberate. Stuck, are you? She said, her voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Well, lucky for you. The Grand is always open to weary travelers. You mean stay here? Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. Where else would you go? The woman replied, a hint of something sharp beneath her flat tone. The road's a long one in the dark, and the mountain air gets mighty cold at night. We exchanged desperate glances. Staying here felt wrong, deeply, fundamentally wrong. But she was right. The road out was long, winding, and we had 2 young children. Walking in the dark was out of question, and the thought of sleeping in the car in that isolated parking lot, exposed, was equally unappealing. Do you have rooms? I asked, resignation heavy in my voice. We do, she said, her smile widening slightly. Plenty of rooms. We've been expecting residents. Residents, not guests. The word hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. How much for 2 rooms? I asked, figuring we'd need one for us and one for the kids. The price is reasonable, she said, and payment is flexible. Flexible? That was a strange way to put it, but I didn't have the energy to question it. We were tired, stressed, and trapped. All right, I sighed. We'll take 2 rooms. She nodded, her dark eyes glinting in the dim light. She produced a large leather-bound ledger from beneath the counter. The pages were yellowed and brittle. She dipped a quill pen into an inkwell and turned the book towards us. Sign here, she instructed, pointing to a line near the bottom of a page filled with names in faded ink. I leaned in to sign. As I did, I caught sight of some of the names above ours. They weren't typical names. Some were just initials. Others seemed to be single words, almost descriptions. And the dates went back years, decades, even centuries. It looked less like a hotel register and more like a record of something else entirely. Were all these names? I asked, a fresh wave of unease washing over me. Our esteemed guests, she said simply, not looking up. The ones who chose to reside with us permanently. Permanently. The word echoed in the quiet lobby, sending a chill down my spine. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the page. Michael, what is it? Sarah asked, seeing my hesitation. I didn't want to scare her or the kids, but I couldn't shake the feeling that signing this ledger was more than just checking into a hotel. It felt like a contract. Nothing, I said, forcing a smile, just admiring the old book. I quickly scribbled my name and a hurried signature. The woman nodded, pulled the ledger back, and carefully blotted the ink. She then reached under the counter again, produced 2 large, heavy iron keys. Each had a thick, tarnished tag attached with a room number etched into it. 207 and 208. Second floor, she said, handing them to me. Rooms are adjoining. Stairs are just past the lobby. Thank you, I said, taking the keys. They felt cold and heavy in my hand. We gathered our small overnight bags from the car. Thankfully, we brought them in just in case, and walked towards the stairs. The staircase was wide and creaky, the wood worn smooth by countless feet over the years. The air on the stairs was even colder, and the scent of decay was stronger here. As we climbed, I felt an undeniable sense of being watched. I glanced back toward the lobby. The woman was still at the desk, a dark, motionless shape in the dim light, her eyes, I was sure, following our ascent. The second-floor hallway was long and narrow, lined with doors on either side. The wallpaper was peeling in places, the pattern faded and stained. There were a few gas lamps flickering on the walls, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and shift. The silence here was profound, broken only by our footsteps and the frantic beating of my own heart. We found rooms 207 and 208. We were side by side, connected by a locked door inside. I fumbled with the heavy key for 207. finally getting to turn the lock with a loud thunk. The room was large, dominated by a heavy four-poster bed draped in thick, dark fabric. The air was stale and cold, smelling of dust and something else, something metallic like old blood. The curtains were drawn, plunging the room into near darkness. I flipped a switch near the door, but nothing happened. No electricity. Of course, this was supposed to be an authentic 1880s experience. There was a small oil lamp on the bedside table. My hands trembling slightly, I fumbled with matches from my pocket and managed to light it. The warm glow pushed back the shadows a little, but also seemed to make the room feel smaller, more claustrophobic. The furniture was heavy, dark wood, a dresser, a washstand with a porcelain basin and pitcher, a single upright chair, a faded landscape painting hung crookedly on the wall. Everything felt old, used, and imbued with a silent history. Sarah went into the connecting room, 208 for the kids. I heard her gasp softly. "It's exactly the same," she said, returning to our room. "Even the painting is identical." That was odd. 2 rooms side by side, furnished identically, right down to the artwork. It felt less like standard hotel decor and more deliberate. Lily and Tom were clearly scared. Their faces were pale in the lamplight, their eyes wide. "I don't like it here, Dad," Lily whispered, clutching my arm. "It's just an old hotel, sweetie," I said, trying to sound reassuring, but my voice fell hollow. "A little spooky maybe, but we'll be fine, just for one night." We unpacked our bags, a change of clothes, toothbrushes, a book Sarah had brought. The mundane actions felt strangely out of place in the unsettling atmosphere of the room. As we were getting ready for bed, the strange noises started. At first, I thought it was just the old building settling, creaks and groans from the walls and floorboards. But then there were other sounds. Whispers, faint, indistinct, like voices just outside the door or even within the walls themselves. I went to the door and pressed my ear against it. Silence. But the moment I moved away, the whisper would start again like a dark, rustling secret. Then came the footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps in the hallway outside our room. Heavy, like someone dragging their feet. They would approach our door, linger for a moment, then slowly move away, the sound fading down the corridor. I peered to the peephole, but there was only darkness in the hallway, broken by the faint, flickering glow of the gas lamps down the hall. Yet the sound of the footsteps was undeniable. Someone was out there. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with fear. I nodded, my throat tight. "It's just the old building." I tried again, but neither of us believed it. Tom started to cry softly in the next room. Lily was huddled on the bed, her arms wrapped around herself. I went into their room. Tom was sobbing into his pillow. "There are monsters," he whimpered. "No, honey, there are no monsters," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed and stroking his hair. Just the wind outside, or maybe the old pipes. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. The feeling of being watched was stronger than ever, a palpable presence in the room with us. We decided to keep the connecting door between our rooms unlocked, just in case. We left the oil lamps burning low. Sleep was impossible. Every creak, every whisper, every distant sound sent jolts of adrenaline through me. The footsteps returned, louder this time. They stopped directly outside our door. There was a long, drawn-out pause. Then, a soft scratching sound like fingernails on wood. My blood ran cold. I grabbed a heavy brass lamp from the bedside table, holding it like a weapon. Sarah was sitting bolt upright in bed, her eyes fixed on the door. Lily and Tom were silent in the next room, probably too terrified to make a sound. The scratching stopped. Another long silence. Then, a soft, low chuckle from the hallway. It wasn't a human laugh. It was dry, rattling, like stones tumbling in a shallow grave. I wanted to scream, to shout, to demand who was out there, but fear had frozen my voice. The chuckle faded. The footsteps started again, moving slowly away down the hall. We stayed awake for what felt like hours, listening to the terrifying symphony of the old hotel. The whispers, the footsteps, the unsettling silence in between. As the night wore on, the sound became bolder. We heard doors opening and closing down the hall. Muffled voices, not whispering anymore, but speaking in low, guttural tones. And then, a sound that made my blood run even colder, a low, mournful keening, like someone in terrible pain, followed by the sickening thud of something heavy hitting the floor. My mind raced, trying to find a rational explanation. Was this some kind of elaborate, immersive performance by the reenactors? A haunted hotel experience designed to scare guests? If so, it was far too realistic, too terrifying. And where were the other guests? We hadn't seen or heard anyone else staying here. Just before dawn, the sounds finally subsided. The silence that followed was almost as terrifying as the noise had been. It felt like the darkness outside, thick and watchful. We lay in bed, exhausted and trembling, waiting for the first hint of light. When the sky outside finally began to lighten, painting the edges of the curtains with a pale gray glow, the feeling of immediate danger lessened slightly, replaced by a deep, bone-weary dread. We got up, moving stiffly, our bodies aching from the tension. The kids were pale and silent, their eyes shadowed. "We need to get out of here," Sarah said, her voice hoarse. "I know," I replied, as soon as it's light enough to see the road. We dressed quickly, our movements jerky. We packed our bags, our hands shaking. The silence of the hotel felt oppressive in the morning light. We crept out of our rooms and back into the hallway. The flickering gas lamps were still on, casting an eerie glow on the faded wallpaper. The hallway was empty, but the air still felt heavy, charged with malevolent energy. As we reached the top of the stairs, we heard sounds coming from the lobby, not the ticking of the clock anymore. Low voices, movement. We paused at the top of the stairs, peering down into the dim lobby. The woman was still behind the desk, but she wasn't alone. There were others, several figures, dressed in the same period clothing as the reenactors, but their faces were wrong. They were pale, almost translucent. Their skin stretched tightly over bone. Their eyes were sunken and dark, empty of any life. Their movements were stiff, jerky, unnatural. They were gathered around the desk, talking in low, rasping voices that sounded like rustling paper. These weren't actors. Not anymore. If they ever had been, my blood ran cold. This was it. The terrifying reality behind the historical facade. These were the residents the woman had spoken of. We needed to get out. Now, we started to back away from the stairs, slowly, silently, trying not to make a sound on the creaking steps. But it was too late. One of the figures in the lobby looked up. Its head snapped towards us with unnatural speed. Its eyes, hollow and black, locked onto ours. It let out a sound that was not quite a gasp, not quite a cry, but a dry, rattling noise that sent shivers down my spine. "Look," it rasped, pointing a bony finger at us. The new ones, the other figures turned, their blank faces lifting towards us. A chorus of dry, rustling voices rose from the lobby. New residents. They stayed. They signed. Panic seized me. "Run," I hissed at Sarah. We turned and ran back down the hallway, our footsteps echoing loudly on the wooden floorboards. Behind us, we heard the horrifying sound of multiple pairs of feet scrambling up the stairs, their steps heavy and uneven. We raced down the hallway, our hearts pounding. We needed to find another way out. A window, a back door, anything. We reached the end of the hall. No other stairs, no exit signs. Just a window, high up and nailed shut. The sounds of pursuit were getting closer. They were fast, faster than they looked. "In here!" Sarah cried, pointing to a door. It was slightly ajar. We burst into the room. It was another bedroom, similar to ours, but even darker, the curtains drawn tight. The air was thick with the smell of decay. I slammed the door shut and fumbled with the lock. There was none, just a simple latch. We were trapped through the thin wooden door. We could hear them in the hallway, their dry, rasping voices, their unnatural movements just outside. "Where did they go?" one rasped. "They must be here," another replied, its voice a low growl. We huddled together in the dark room, pressing ourselves against the far wall. Lily and Tom were crying silently, their small bodies shaking. The doorknob rattled violently. Something was trying to get in. "Open the door, new residents." A voice hissed through the wood. It sounded like the woman from the lobby. "Time to join us. Time to become part of Oakhaven." The door shuddered under repeated blows. The wood began to splinter around the latch. We knew it wouldn't hold for long. My mind raced. We couldn't stay here. We couldn't let them take us. I looked around the room desperately. Was there any way out? The window was sealed. There was nothing else. Then I noticed something. A large, heavy dresser against one wall. Could we move it? Block the door? Help me? I urged Sarah. Together, with desperate strength born of terror, we pushed against a heavy piece of furniture. It scraped loudly against the wooden floor, but we managed to inch it towards the door. It was heavy, filled with God knew what, but it might buy us a few precious seconds. We shoved the dresser against the door, just as the latch finally gave way with a splintering crash. The door burst inward, hitting the dresser with a thud. Through the gap created by the dresser, we saw them, several of the residents. Their faces pale and gaunt, their eyes like black holes. They were trying to push past the obstruction, their movements jerky and unnatural. They reached through the gap, their bony hands clawing at the air, their fingers long and skeletal. One of them let out that dry, rattling chuckle again. "Don't fight it," it rasped. "It's easier if you don't fight." We scrambled further into the room, away from the doorway. Then, a sound from the next room, a soft thump, followed by a low moan. My blood ran cold. The connecting door. It must lead somewhere. The other room. I yelled to Sarah. Maybe there's another way out through there. With the residents still struggling with the dresser at the main door, we stumbled towards the connecting door. It was still locked from our side. I fumbled with the heavy iron key, my hand shaking so badly I could barely insert it into the lock. Behind us, we heard the dresser scraping again as they managed to push it further. Their raspy voices were louder, filled with anticipation. Finally, the key turned. The lock clicked open. I wrenched the door open, and we tumbled into the adjoining room. This room was different. It was sparsely furnished, almost bare. But in the center of the room, on the floor, was something horrifying. A figure lay there, its body contorted at an unnatural angle. It was one of the reenactors we had seen earlier in the town, the man who played the blacksmith. His eyes were wide and staring, filled with a terror that mirrored our own. His skin was pale and waxy, and a dark, sticky substance was slowly spreading on the floor beneath him. And standing over him, its back to us, was another figure, tall and gaunt, dressed in dark, old-fashioned clothes. It was hunched over the blacksmith's body, its shoulders moving rhythmically. As we entered, it turned slowly. Its face was a mask of stretched, pale skin, its mouth a wide, toothless grin. Its eyes were not eyes at all, but swirling vortexes of darkness. It held something in its hands, a long, rusted mining pickaxe. And the dark substance on the floor, it was blood. This was what happened to the residents. This was the horrifying process. The creature, whatever it was, hissed, a sound like escaping gas. It dropped the pickaxe with a clang and started shuffling towards us, its movements disjointed and terrifying. We didn't hesitate. We turned and ran to the door on the other side of this room, the one that would lead back out into the main hallway. As I reached the doorknob, I saw something that made my stomach clench. The door was scarred, deeply gouged, as if something with immense force had tried to break through from the other side. And then I heard it, from behind this door, the dry, rattling chuckle. They were everywhere, trapped. The creature in the room with us was closing in, its arms outstretched, those dark vortexes for eyes fixed on us. "Go back!" I yelled at Sarah and the kids, pushing them behind me. I looked around desperately again. There had to be another way. A window? Anything? My eyes landed on the pickaxe, lying on the floor next to the blacksmith's body. It was crude, heavy, but it was a weapon. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, I lunged for it. My fingers closed around the cold, rough wood of the handle. It was heavy, unbalanced, but I hefted it, turning to face the approaching creature. It stopped a few feet away, tilting its head, that horrifying grin fixed on its face. It seemed curious. "Join us," it rasped, its voice a dry whisper. "Become one of us. Live forever in Oakhaven." "Never," I screamed, swinging the pickaxe wildly. The creature was surprisingly agile. It dodged the blow with a jerky movement, its body seeming to flow out of the way. But I had bought Sarah and the kids a moment. "The window," Sarah screamed, pointing to one in this room. It wasn't nailed shut like the other one. It was old, painted stuck, but it might open, leaving me to face the creature. Sarah and the kids scrambled toward the window. They struggled with the latch, pulling and tugging. The creature advanced again, its attention now divided between me and the window. I swung the pickaxe again, aiming for its head. This time, it didn't completely dodge. The point of the pickaxe grazed its shoulder. There was no blood, no cry of pain, just a dry, papery rustle and a strange metallic clinking sound. The creature recoiled slightly, its head snapping back. The grin on its face faltered for a moment, replaced by something that looked like irritation. From the main hallway, I heard the dresser being moved further, the sounds of the residents pushing through the now open doorway. Sarah cried out. The window was stuck. It wouldn't budge. Despair threatened to overwhelm me. We were surrounded, trapped, facing horrors I couldn't even begin to comprehend. Creature in the room with me lunged. I swung the pickaxe again, blindly, desperately. This time I connected. The point of the pickaxe struck it squarely in the chest with a sickening thud. Again, no blood, but a strange cracking sound, like dry wood breaking. The creature stumbled back, a rattling gasp escaping its formless mouth. It gave me a moment. I glanced at the connecting door I had just opened. It led back into the room with the blacksmith. The creature from that room was gone, but the body was still there, horrifyingly mutilated. And the door to the hallway in that room, the one that was gouged and scratched, it was open. They were coming from both sides now. The creature I had struck was recovering, its dark eyes fixing on me again. "There's nowhere to run," it rasped, its voice stronger now, filled with a chilling malice. Oakhaven keeps its residents. Just then, a sound from the hallway outside this room. A new sound, not the shuffling, scraping of the residents. It was heavier, more solid. Footsteps and voices. Human voices. "Hello? Is anyone in there?" The hotel's not open to visitors after sundown. My heart leaped into my throat. Help? Was it possible? The creature in the room froze, its head snapping toward the sound in the hallway. The rasping voices in the other room also fell silent. Through the door, I heard more voices. They sounded like park rangers or local authorities. They were telling whoever was inside to open the door. The creature in front of me hissed, a sound of pure fury. It seemed torn, its focus shifting between us and the new arrivals. "They shouldn't be here," it rasped, its dark eyes narrowing. Suddenly, a loud banging on the door in the hallway. "Open up. This is the sheriff's office." The creatures in the hallway stirred. I heard their dry, rustling voices rise in agitation. The creature in the room with us seemed to make a decision. With surprising speed, it darted past me towards connecting door, slipping back into the room with the blacksmith's body. "Now!" I yelled to Sarah. She and the kids scrambled away from the stuck window. We rushed back to the door in the hallway, the one the sheriff was banging on. I fumbled with the heavy key again, my hands still shaking. I got in the lock, turned it, and pulled the door open. 2 men stood in the hallway, dressed in sheriff's uniforms. Behind them, the flickering gas lamps cast long shadows. They looked surprised to see us bursting out of the room, wild-eyed and disheveled. We missed the bus," I stammered, the words tumbling out. "We got stuck, and there are people in there. They're not actors. There's something else." The sheriffs exchanged a look, skeptical. "Sir, Oakhaven is closed after hours," the older sheriff said sternly. "You shouldn't have stayed." "We had no choice," Sarah cried, her voice raw with fear. They trapped us, the woman at the desk. She signed us in, and the others, they're trying to get us. They killed someone in there. I pointed back towards a connecting door. The younger sheriff looked uneasy. The older one, however, seemed unmoved. Just then, from the room we had just fled, we heard a dry, rattling chuckle. The older sheriff's eyes narrowed. He glanced toward the door behind us. "All right," he said, his voice low and cautious. "Stay here. Don't move. Billy, check it out." The younger sheriff, Billy, nodded nervously. He drew his weapon and cautiously approached the open doorway. He paused at the threshold, peering into the dim room. A moment of tense silence. Then Billy let out a strangled cry. "Sheriff, what the—" Before he could finish, a dark shape launched itself out of the room. It was one of the residents, its movements a blur of unnatural speed. It lunged at Billy, its hands reaching for his throat. The older sheriff reacted instantly. He raised his own weapon and fired. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed hallway. The resident recoiled, a dry, cracking sound echoing as the bullet struck it. It stumbled back into the room. But it wasn't dead, not in the way living things die. It simply ceased to move, collapsing into a heap of what looked like brittle, dark material. The older sheriff rushed to Billy's side. Billy was shaken but unharmed. What in God's name was that? Billy whispered, his face pale. The older sheriff didn't answer immediately. He looked from the fallen resident back to us, his expression grim. "Let's get out of here," he said, his voice tight. "Now." He didn't need to tell us twice. We scrambled past him and down the stairs, the sheriffs following closely behind us. As we descended, we heard sounds from the upper floors. More dry, rustling movements. More of them were coming. We burst out of the hotel doors and into the pale morning light. The air outside felt clean and cold after the oppressive atmosphere of the hotel. We ran across the empty main street toward the exit of the town. The sheriffs were right behind us, their weapons drawn, scanning the empty buildings. As we neared the edge of town, we heard shouts from behind us. We glanced back. Several figures were emerging from the hotel, shambling after us with unnatural speed. Their movements were jerky, their forms indistinct in the morning mist that was beginning to gather. The sheriffs yelled at us to keep running. They turned and fired at the pursuing figures. More dry cracks echoed through the quiet town. We didn't stop running until we reached the parking lot and our minivan. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking violently. I got the door open, practically shoving Sarah and the kids inside. I jumped into the driver's seat, slammed the door shut, and started the engine with a roar. As I reversed out of the parking space, I saw the sheriffs still standing at the edge of town, firing at the advancing residents. The dry, cracking sounds were interspersed with the sharp reports of their firearms. I didn't wait to see what happened. I spun the minivan around and sped down the dirt road, the tires spitting gravel behind us. We didn't speak for a long time. The kids were sobbing quietly in the back. Sarah was white-faced, staring straight ahead. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. We drove in silence, the horror of the night replaying in our minds. The empty eyes, the dry voices, the unnatural movements, the horrifying discovery in the connecting room. We reached the paved road, then the highway. We drove for hours, putting as much distance as possible between us and Oakhaven. Finally, when the sun was high in the sky, we pulled over at a gas station in a small, anonymous town. We got out of the car, our legs shaky, our bodies sore. I called the local police, then the state police, then the county sheriff's office closest to Oakhaven. I reported what had happened, told them about the hotel, the residents, the sheriffs who had helped us. They listened patiently. They asked questions. They took down details. But I could hear the skepticism in their voices. It sounded like a crazy story. Missing the bus, getting scared in an old hotel, imagining things. I insisted. I told them about the sheriffs who had helped us. I gave them their descriptions. They promised to look into it, to send a unit to Oakhaven. We waited and waited. The hours crawled by. Finally, a call back. A different voice this time. Official, measured. Mr. Miller, the voice said, we sent a unit to Oakhaven. My heart pounded. And what did you find? The town appears to be deserted, the voice said, completely empty. There's no sign of any of the costumed individuals you described. My blood ran cold. But the hotel? The Oakhaven Grand? Did you check there? Yes, we did, the voice replied. The hotel is locked up tight. No signs of forced entry. Looks like it hasn't been occupied in years. It's full of dust and cobwebs. That's impossible. I yelled, my voice cracking. We were just there. Last night, we saw them. The woman at the desk. The others, the sheriffs saw them too. Were those sheriffs? A pause on the other end of the line. Sir, there's no record of any officers from the county sheriff's office being dispatched to Oakhaven last night or this morning, the voice said flatly. No reports of any disturbance or any missing persons from that area, and no sign of any dry, brittle material or anything else out of the ordinary. My mind reeled. Deserted? Locked up? No record of the sheriffs? Had we imagined it all? Was it some kind of shared hallucination brought on by stress and fear? No, it was too real. The terror, the sounds, the sights, the feeling of pure, unadulterated evil. And the sheriffs, they were real. I saw them. They fired their weapons. They're covering it up, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Or something happened to them. The voice on the other end was polite but firm. Sir, we understand you had a frightening experience, but we found nothing to corroborate your story. Perhaps you should see a doctor. Get some rest. They thought I was crazy. We never went back to Oakhaven. We didn't dare. The memory of that night is seared into our minds, a dark stain that will never fade. I woke drenched in sweat, the key from the hospital burning hot on my nightstand, though I knew that was impossible. When I reached for it, my fingers came away stained with what looked like blood. 3 days ago, I made my decision. I packed my car with the supplies Elizabeth had specified in my dream. Sage, salt, iron filings, a silver mirror, and a knife with a bone handle that I had to special order from an occult shop online. And my own blood. That was key. My blood, freely given, to reinforce Elizabeth's binding. I drove back to West Virginia under clear skies. No storm this time to trap me inside. Whispering Pines looked different in daylight. Less imposing, more pathetic. Decay made visible. Part of the roof had indeed collapsed, presumably where I had escaped that night. The front door stood open, as if waiting for me. I hesitated on the threshold, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. But I thought of Elizabeth, of what she had sacrificed to keep Thomas Blackwood contained. If I ran, he would eventually find another way out, another Markham to target. So I entered, equipment bag over my shoulder, camera in hand once more. Not to document for my subscribers this time,